let me go to Marcus Hellyer, who's a senior analyst with the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, joining us from Canberra. Thanks for joining us, Marcus. Given these latest claims of alleged war crimes by Russian troops and outrage around the world, some countries are looking at expelling Russian diplomats. The Labor Party is calling on our federal government to do the same. Is it time to expel diplomats from Australia?
Well, you can do it, and I think it sends a very clear signal. Is it helpful? I'm not entirely sure. I think the kinds of support the Australian government has been providing in terms of weapons, Bushmasters, as well as humanitarian aid, I think is a more effective kind of assistance, but expelling diplomats sends a signal, sure.
Yeah, that is all it does, I suppose. Tell us on the strategic front, what does it look like Russia is doing now? Because there's been a lot of focus on its withdrawing from some areas. Is it just reassessing the situation, regathering its forces for another brutal assault?
Yeah, there's a lot of debate in the strategic policy community about exactly what's going on. The Russians have argued that, the move from the north towards Kiev was always sort of just a feint to kind of wear down Ukrainian forces and draw them away from the main battle in the east, in the Donbass. I'm not really convinced about that, but certainly Russia is taking a pause. It's received a bit of a mauling from the Ukrainians, so it is withdrawing its battered forces in the north. It does seem to be refocusing on the Donbass. Now, whether that's to achieve a limited goal, which is to occupy all of the Donbass, so you'd recall that the Russian-backed separatists controlled a part of the Donbass region. Maybe the goal is to occupy all of the Donbass, and so when the Ukrainians and Russians negotiate a settlement, the facts on the ground are that the Russians occupy all of the Donbass, and that's the start of their negotiating position. It's a little hard to say, since the Russian goals for the war have always been a little confused, ranging from this claim of, they want denazification and demilitarization, to expelling all NATO troops from former Russian, Soviet and Warsaw Pact countries, which would mean that there couldn't be any NATO troops in Poland, to NATO removing all nuclear weapons from Europe. So the Russian position has been a little inconsistent. But I think what we can say is that when you go into negotiations, boots on the ground matter, facts on the ground matter. So I do think Russia wants to firm up its position in the east, in the Donbass region, and also on the Black Sea coast, so that their starting position is that we control these territories and we're not going to give them up, either at all or unless we get something really good.
Just very briefly, Marcus, closer to home and China's agreement with Solomon Islands, is there any way that deal can be undone? It sounds like China and Solomon Islands are determined to go ahead with it.
I think it's going to be very hard with Prime Minister Sogavare in power. So I think it'll be hard to undo, but we can mitigate the effects of that. And, we shouldn't overreact. We shouldn't certainly cut off ties with Solomon Islands, but we need to enlist allies here, and key allies are the Pacific Island community. And there's already been a lot of statements there saying, that these kinds of arrangements with China are not in anybody's interest. Other Pacific Island countries certainly don't want to see a standing military presence from China in the region.
Yeah, that'll be the key indeed, working with the Pacific Islands Forum to try and get some unanimity there. Thanks for joining us, Marcus. I appreciate it. Marcus Hellyer there from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute.